You are listening to One Nation Under Crime, a historical, chronological true crime podcast. Each week, we go through our nation's history and discuss one case from each year, starting in 1800. I'm Kayla.
And I'm Leah.
We are off and running this week, I can tell you that. This is a lot of research for this episode, I can say that. It has been an interesting one to look into.
Ooh,
so
do tell.
It's interesting. We'll say that. Brad, my favorite NSA agent, is for sure putting a closer watch on me these days.
Can you get closer? Can you?
He's getting to. I feel as though he's emotionally invested at this point. And it's really unhealthy, and honestly, he shouldn't be.
We need his address so we can send him like a card or
He's
something.
probably listening, so I mean,
just shoot it to us, man.
Just let me know.
You got all
Look,
the contacts.
You already know all the information about me. It's only fair. So we'll go ahead and get into it this week because I don't really know how long this episode is. It's going to be a little bit different kind of from what we've done before, and y'all will see why.
She never tells me this until we start recording, guys, so I'm just as surprised as you.
So our sources for this week, we have my nickname, the historical crime detective. Then we have medium.com, smithsonianmag.com, Mental Floss, always a good one, Atlas Obscura, also a really fun website. And then your favorite, my favorite, Brad's favorite,
Murder by Gaslight.
Murder by Gaslight.
I knew it.
Look at you.
Look at me.
So we are in the year of 1838 this year. We're just going right past. We're now in episode 41. So we're just creeping on up there.
Almost to my age.
Almost next week.
Next week.
So we'll get to our events in 1838. January 6th, Samuel Morse and Alfred Vail first publicly demonstrated the telegraph that used dots and dashes, and this was the forerunner to what became Morse code.
Mm-hmm.
January 26th, Tennessee enacted. I said this last week that this was coming, so I forewarned y'all to get emotionally prepared.
Here we go.
Tennessee enacted the first prohibition law in the United States. I just put in parentheses, boo.
We boo Tennessee all the time.
And in Tennessee, of all places. Really, Tennessee?
Because lots of good stuff happens there.
It's fine. February 15th, Kentucky, look at them go, passed a law permitting women to attend school when certain conditions were met.
Oh, well, I thought you were going to say something about bourbon.
No, not yet.
Bourbon!
Not this week.
Okay.
March 8th, the new...
what conditions? I wanted to know.
It didn't say. They were...
Doggone it, you got me excited.
Well, they didn't say what conditions there were. I'm going to assume they were a bit strenuous.
Oh, well.
That's what I'm going to go with.
Well, that's why I wanted to know what conditions.
Yeah.
They could stand on their head while reciting something.
Probably.
Who
knows?
She's a witch.
Maybe so. I don't know. They didn't say.
Okay, continue.
And I had enough research to do for this episode, so,
Fine.
March 8th, the New Orleans Mint struck its first coinage. 30 dimes.
Well.
3 whole dollars.
That's a lot.
Sure.
I don't think that even fits a whole roll.
No, I think a roll is...
A roll is $5.
$5.
I used to be a bank teller. I know these things.
April 27th, a fire broke out that destroyed half of Charleston. We did talk about that in our episode about Lavinia Fisher.
Wish I could tell you more about Charleston. Moving on.
Oh, gosh. May 26th, the Cherokee Removal began with the forced relocation of the Cherokee Native American tribe, which resulted in the deaths of an estimated 4,000 Cherokee tribe members.
So sad.
Because
sad. People are garbage. See?
Look at there.
Look, we even sang it together.
We did this time.
Look at that.
It's rare. It will never happen again, I guarantee it.
Blind squirrel nut, something like that.
June 12th, the Iowa Territory was created. At the time of its founding, Iowa Territory encompassed parts of modern-day Minnesota, South Dakota, North Dakota, as well as all of Iowa.
That's a lot.
Mm-hmm. And September 3rd, future abolitionist Frederick Douglass, we talked about him last week. He boarded a train in Maryland using identification papers from a freed naval seaman to escape slavery.
And can I tell you, my sweet, the portrait that everybody knows.
Oh, I do recall
of Frederick Douglass.
I do recall, and I do know where this is going.
Yes, my sweet Leonard. His hair, look,
just like it.
He looks like Frederick Douglass, y'all. Like his hair with his ears.
So, anyways, September 19th, Ephraim Morris patented the railroad brake. I'm sure a lot of people are really thankful for that.
Yes, and I love the name Ephraim.
Ephraim's a fun name.
I love it.
October 5th, the Killa Massacre occurred. It is believed to have been both the largest and last Native American attack on white settlers in East Texas. There were 18 casualties that were the people were either killed or carried away.
Oh.
Carried away. Which, to be honest, you're taking my land.
I mean,
of which I've lived here forever.
I mean,
I can't say that I can blame them. October 16th.
Still killing is bad.
I mean, it is, but I get it. Keep in mind, at the same time, though, all the Cherokee, they just had 4,000 people killed trying. It's not a good time for anybody. So, October 16th, the Grave Creek Stone was allegedly discovered in Moundsville, West Virginia. It is a small sandstone disc inscribed on one side with some 25 characters. If genuine, it could prove the evidence of a primitive alphabet. But the discovery that the characters can be found But the discovery that the characters can be found in a 1752 book suggests that it was probably a fraud.
Oh, fraudulent.
October 27th, Missouri Governor Lilburn Boggs.
That's a name.
I know. Issued the Extermination Order, which ordered all Mormons to leave the state or be exterminated.
Oh my gosh.
like
you exterminate vermin. You exterminate ants.
Yeah.
You exterminate
Extermination
critters.
Order.
Oh my stars.
And I'm sure we'll dig into it more because we do have an episode coming up that will be Mormon centric. Because it's interesting. There's a murder.
Is interesting. Ooh.
There's a murder afoot. So,
of course, there's a murder.
We will get to that eventually. And so I'm sure we'll dig some more into that. But yeah, it was called the Extermination Order. So you had to either leave or die.
That is, I mean, extermination of people, guys.
All right.
I mean, murder is wrong. Extermination of people, that's really wrong.
That just sounds terrible.
That really does.
And our undated event for this year, the Brown School was established in North Carolina. It is now Duke University. Our births in 1838, January 4th, we have General Tom Thumb. We talked about him in our P.T. Barnum episode.
I was going to say, I know who that is.
He's a circus performer and entertainer, and he is known for being a part of P.T. Barnum's shows. He is a Capricorn. He also, what did we talk about in that episode? He also started drinking by the time he was 9.
Yeah.
He was real young. It was bad. Not a good time.
Nope.
January,
he was famous.
Yes, he was. January 29th, Edward Williams Morley was an American scientist known for his precise and accurate measurement of the atomic weight of oxygen.
Oh.
Kind of important. He is an Aquarius. Oh.
Come on.
Gracious. February 22nd, Margaret Elizabeth Sangster. That's what we're going to go with.
Okay.
She is an American poet, author, and editor. She was eventually the editor of Harper's Bazaar.
Ooh.
I
Was
know.
like the first woman
I
editor?
don't know. It just said she was eventually an editor of Harper's Bazaar. So I don't know if
Wow.
she was the first,
Yeah.
but this was in
That's a big
1838.
deal.
So, I
deal.
mean, it was before the 1900s
Yeah.
that she for sure, because I mean, just based off of the years, but yeah, it was pretty impressive
Big
for her.
deal.
So she's a Pisces. May 10th, this is a name that everyone knows. John Wilkes Booth was born.
Oh, we know him.
He was an actor and the eventual assassin of 16th President of the United States, Abraham Lincoln.
Yes.
He is a Taurus, and yes, we do have an episode on Ol' Abe. So we will get to him eventually as well. This just said July. Just July.
Oh.
The whole month, I guess. That's a really long labor. His name was Bass Reeves. Really cool name,
That
too,
is
by the
kinda
way.
cool.
He is one of the first Black deputy U.S. Marshals west of the Mississippi River.
Those were some bad dudes.
I know. We're going to talk about them, too, at some point. So I'm pretty
Good.
excited about that.
Those were some bad dudes. You did not mess with them.
No. So given Bass's date of birth, he
Bass.
he could either be a Cancer or a Leo.
Like, did they put two words together like he was bad?
I mean, I don't know. It's
I'm just
I would
saying.
say he's a deputy U.S. Marshal, so I'm gonna say yes. That's what I'm gonna go with. Wonder if he knew Walker, Texas Ranger. Anyways, so December 3rd, and yes, guys, I do know that Texas Walker Ranger was a lot longer after that, but
yes,
still,
but
such a good show. December 3rd, Cleveland Abe. He was an American meteorologist and advocate for time zones. He is the father of the National Weather Service.
Oh.
And he's a Sagittarius.
They give me alerts on my phone.
Not on mine. I don't need that negativity.
So that's why I text her and say, "Hey, are you safe? Are you okay? Is the creek behind you flooding?"
We had so not long ago when we talked about it on the episode when the tornado came, we talked about it in an earlier episode in depth about when the tornado hit like 3 doors down from Leo. Well, at the same time, not the same tornado, but in the same
multiple here.
Yeah, in the same storm of that day, one came extremely close to my house. And
I checked on her.
I might have been driving home at a time when I was like, we got to get, because we were at the office and I was like, we got to go. Like, we got to go now. And so, which was actually a good thing because the road that our office is on closed because trees and stuff got down. And so, yeah, had we waited,
you would have been stuck.
We would have been stuck there because at least for a while. So anyways, it was interesting, but yeah, the National Weather Service, we got old James Spann. So as long as I don't see those suspenders and nobody outside of the state of Alabama knows what that means, but he is a great weatherman. We love James Spann. He is, if he's listening, hi.
We hope you listen.
I love James Spann. This was the tornado that as he was on, he got news that the tornado had just hit his house.
Yes.
And he was on. So he is basically the weatherman of all of Alabama. He's wonderful. He's fantastic. Probably, to be honest, I did study, like we talked about this, I did study journalism and broadcast and those kinds of things. He truly is one of the best weathermen that I've ever seen. Absolutely. And that's not just being like partial to him. Like we all love Al Roker, but he like he knows these places. He will say like
right near Wesley's booby trap.
Yeah. So we have a place in Alabama that is a dance night club of sorts for adult entertainment called sorry if children are around, but it's called Wesley's Booby Trap. And so that is truly a marker when he's discussing really bad weather. We've heard him, and he won't say the full name. You'll notice he'll always go, this is near Wesley's, and he'll say the city name. But he knows where everything is. Like, it doesn't matter where.
He knows back roads. He knows, like, markers. And he'll tell you, you need to be in your safe space if you're near here. If you see his jacket come off, it's getting pretty serious.
So he wears
you see
suspenders.
the sleeves rolled up.
You got it. First, it's the suspenders.
Yep,
so if you see the jacket come off, and he always wears suspenders, you see the jacket come off, you see the suspenders, things are getting real. You see the sleeves roll up, you need to seek shelter.
Yes.
Like it is getting, because he stays on like 12 hours on the news. Like it's insane. And we are just going to become a James Spann fan club at some point, I suppose. Yep. But truly, he'll say like, this is in Clanton, and he'll say like, this is at the corner of this street and this street. Right. That's where like this store is. Like how do you know those things without, he just knows the areas so well.
He's great.
The joke is always that like James Spann says like, this is going to be on this street and this street, the one where it used to be that restaurant, but it's not anymore, next to the trailer where Miss Martha lives. By the way, if anybody lives in this area, go tell Miss Martha to seek shelter. Like that's always the joke, because he truly does know these areas so well. And he's great. He's fantastic. He's very nice.
We love him.
He always comes to our college and speaks with the elementary education department. So
he's great.
He is really good at that. He goes
to a lot of schools, and he's really great with the kids.
He told me I had great regional diction, and I was very proud of that as someone in broadcast, which basically means if I'm speaking in certain ways, you could not tell where I am from based on, like, you wouldn't say
that is not true for me.
That is Southern. Yeah, that is not true for you.
Look, I am. I
record these episodes, and I also edit them. So yes, I'm more.
Look, I am who I am, but I've been told that my accent is charming. Being Southern is not a bad thing.
Sometimes, I suppose.
I can lay it on thick if I need to.
I mean, I could. I just prefer not to.
I don't care. I am who I am.
Our deaths in 1838, March 7th, we have Robert Townsend. He is most known for being a member of the Culper spy ring.
I know that name for something else.
Might be. And then September 1st, William Clark, famous explorer of the Lewis and Clark expedition. He is the Clark and Lewis and Clark. We did talk about Meriwether in an earlier episode, and so William Clark died September 1st of 1838. We are going to get into our case for this week, and I did say that this is a little bit different from some of the other cases that we have done before, and there is a reason, and we'll get to it. So October 5th of 1838, the New York Sun falsely reported that Miss Mary Cecilia Rogers had disappeared from her home. And then July 28th of 1841, police found the corpse of a woman in Hoboken, New Jersey, floating in the Hudson River.
Ew.
So how do we go from a woman being falsely reported to her being dead?
Well, I mean,
over a span of 3 years.
Ugh.
It's interesting. We'll get to it. So, as you just heard, we are between New York and New Jersey for this week. We are mainly in New York City. We have discussed New York City so many times in our podcast already. Truly, you can learn most everything you want to know about New York City by listening to those episodes. So, this is a more kind of, it's a big case because a lot of things go on. So we're not covering an area this week. We're not covering anything extra. We're just going straight into our case.
Dive in.
We're diving right in. Mary Cecilia Rogers was born in Lyme, Connecticut. She was likely born in 1820, but the birth records aren't able to be found.
That happens.
Yeah. We do know that she was the only child of Phoebe and James Rogers. Sadly, her father died in a steamboat explosion.
Ew.
Yeah. Yeah. We talked about that
messy.
last week. That's one of the other top 5 ways to go that I would not want. There seems to be some debate on how old Mary was when this occurred because some sources said that she was 5, other sources said she was 17. There's a bit of a gap there.
That's really
It's a
not
bit of a
kind of
gap.
close. Like I can understand
Yeah.
if you say 5 or 7 or
So we'll
you know.
see from y'all heard how many sources I had for this one episode. I had like 6, which is not common for the episodes that I do. Usually there's only a couple, but there is a reason this case is so covered that we'll get to at the end. And there is a lot of speculation as to what occurred, what happened, the timeline of events. So you'll hear me say that in some sources it said this, but other sources it said this. And it's because there is a divide. Like there were 2 sources that said one thing, but there were 3 sources that said the other. So it's like, it's not like I can say, oh, well, this was in one source, but the majority of them said this. It's like it was split everywhere.
Oh, no.
And there's also a reason for that as well. So we'll get into more of it with her. She truly is a mystery and an interesting one at that. So by the time Mary was 17, she was living in the boarding house that her mother ran in New York City, and she decided to get a job as a clerk in a tobacco shop. The shop was owned by John Anderson, and it was on Broadway near Thomas Street in New York City. We know where Broadway is. There was some tension around the decision because Mary's mother did not want her to go and work there. One reason being that Mary had never worked away from the boarding house, but the real reason was because there was a rumor that the shop was a meeting place for men who had particular shady dealings.
Ruh-roh.
Mary's mother eventually allowed her to go, and Mary started her new job at Anderson's Tobacco Emporium. Honestly, an epic name for a tobacco shop.
I mean,
anything that says an emporium,
it just makes it fancy.
It makes it just sound like, I imagine like really intricate wood carving inside of the building, like a super high end cigar shop. Like that's what I think of. Like you go in and it smells like cigar and cedar. It just,
I have to tell you, I love the smell.
It's a good smell.
It really is.
It's a good, and it always has that cedar smell with it because of because
the humidor,
right? Because you keep cedar kind of helps pull out any moisture in areas and stuff like that. But that's what that sounded like to me. Just so, like leather chairs that are kind of overstuffed. It just kind of gives
it that, like, it just elevates just the sound
a little bit.
It makes it fancy,
a little bit more.
And I'm all about fancy.
I mean, it just sounds fun. So Mary got her job there, and surprisingly, Mary made really good money working in the tobacco shop.
Or not surprisingly.
Unsurprisingly, she was paid that well because she was attractive and she brought in a lot of customers. So he paid her a lot to keep her.
I mean, that's what I was going to say. Or not surprisingly.
She was said to be very beautiful. So one source said, quote, "The girl's conduct was apparently a model of modest decorum, and while she was lavish in her smiles, she did not hesitate to repel all undue advances."
Good for her.
I know. I loved that description of her.
Wrap those knuckles if you get a little too frisky.
I mean, one customer wrote that he spent an entire afternoon at the store only to exchange teasing glances with her. Another admirer published a poem in the New York Herald referring to her heaven-like smile and star-like eyes. She even turned the heads of some notable literary figures, such as Washington Irving and editors of most of the New York papers, and they were all known to frequent the shop due to Mary.
Nice.
Mary became somewhat of a local celebrity, as you can tell, and the local press gave her a nickname. She was known as the Beautiful Cigar Girl.
Aww.
On the morning of October 5th, 1838, the shop opened, but Mary was nowhere to be found. John Anderson, the owner of the store, was concerned and asked Phoebe if she had seen her daughter that morning. The New York Sun picked up the news and reported that Miss Mary Cecilia Rogers had disappeared from her home. Her mother reported her missing and said that she found a suicide note.
Uh-oh.
The note was examined by the local coroner, and he said it revealed a, quote, fixed and unalterable determination to destroy herself.
Oh.
Which is notable because the next day, the Times and Commercial Intelligence newspaper reported that the entire disappearance was just a hoax, and Mary simply went to visit a friend in Brooklyn. The news of the hoax started to catch on, and the public was questioning the integrity of both Mary and the New York Sun. Remember, and I put, and to be honest, who could forget? The Great Moon Hoax, published by the New York Sun, was just 2 years earlier than this. Our bipedal tailless beavers. I told y'all they were making a comeback this week. You didn't believe me. I told you they would be back. They would be back. And it is because of these beavers that no one, they were
lost
like,
credibility.
they're like, maybe it is a hoax. Maybe it is. I'm just saying, those beaver, that beaver worked really hard to destroy that telescope.
With that ray.
I mean, he took one for the team, really. And then they turned him into hats, and those women wore them for the trial. It's a whole thing.
I mean, with muffs to match.
I mean, God, those beaver muffs, they'll get you.
Every time make you spit stuff out of your nose.
So it's... Then a random muff could be found out and about, and you're murdered. Who knows?
Gosh.
There's so many different things.
Right by the well.
So these stories of the Great Moon Hoax kind of
hurt them.
Yeah, I put, the citizens had not forgotten the bipedal tailless beavers, which put more fuel on the fire.
Well, understandably. I mean...
Mm-hmm. The accusations from the Times and Commercial Intelligence newspaper became fact in the minds of many New Yorkers. The Sun was accused of fabricating the story in the interests of only selling newspapers. And Mary's boss, John Anderson, was also accused of being in on the hoax. Well, turned out it kind of was a hoax. Probably a better description would be misreported. However, many sources still believe that it was a bit of a publicity stunt for Anderson's tobacco emporium to get a little bit of free press. 6 days later, Mary was back, and it turns out she actually did go out of town to visit a friend and just didn't tell her mother.
So where did this note come from?
As for an explanation for a suicide note, I could not find anything.
Oh, that's helpful.
Yeah, couldn't find anything. The fuss over Mary's supposed disappearance proved to be a good thing for the tobacco shop. Once word got out that Mary was back, the shop was busier than ever. But there was something different about Mary. She seemed sad, and her famous smile rarely made an appearance anymore.
Aww.
If anyone asked where Mary had gone during her, quote, disappearance, she would quickly snap at them and say she was visiting relatives in the countryside. And when anyone asked her boss or her mother, they said the same thing. It was clear to anyone who asked that it was a bit of a touchy subject, and no one would ever ask any more questions past that. It wasn't long after Mary's return that rumors started to spread that claimed she was not in the countryside at all. But she was seen in Brooklyn with a tall, handsome naval officer. It had been barely a week since Mary came back, and once she heard the rumors, she quit working at the cigar shop without notice and went back to work at her mother's boarding house. There are others who speculate that all of the attention Mary received when she returned was too much for her, and that's why she quit. And then there's never any discussion of a man. Like, there's one story that says, or there's a couple that say people saw her with this man, and once the rumors started, that's when she quit. And then there's others that mention nothing about a man, and they say that Mary just was receiving too much attention when she got back, and that's why she quit.
Well, and I could understand that. I mean, especially if they were... I have my own theory, but I'm going to keep quiet until the end.
Regardless of the reason for her quick departure, Mary had established a kind of reputation for herself among the men in town. And even though Mary enjoyed her privacy at the boarding house on 126 Nassau Street, she had several of admirers, and it wasn't uncommon for her to entertain the attention of a man or few of them at one time. Girl got to eat. She says, I'm hungry.
Stop it.
Look, I'm just saying. I'll step halfway on my soapbox for a minute. Men who date multiple women are called a player. Women who date multiple men are called a hussy.
This is true.
I'm just saying. Look, you got a man that's going to feed you Monday night, one that's going to feed you Tuesday night, Wednesday, Thursday. Look, you never have to pay for a meal. You get interesting conversation with multiple people at one time.
As long as all parties are aware.
Nobody needs to be aware. Nobody needs to be in everybody else's business. Look, some things can just be one-sided, and that's okay. I'm just saying. If anybody has seen The Tinder Swindler on Netflix, it's a documentary that just came out a couple of weeks ago, I think. Me and my boyfriend watched it. Quite interesting. It is truly, so I'll jump into it for a second just because it's recent. But this guy was on Tinder, and it's over in Europe, and he was basically like portraying himself as this super rich, savvy, like handsome Israeli man. And he is handsome. He is very good looking.
I mean, you can't fake that.
But he was taking money from women to pay for other women that he was dating. It said that he's stolen a total of like $10 million total.
Goodness.
He was wanted in like 4 countries. He's out of jail. He has a TikTok right now. I came across it on my For You page just scrolling the other day. But he tried to rejoin. So he has different aliases and different names. If you've not seen the documentary, the ending of it, one, knowing that he's out of jail is not satisfying. But the ending of it and what happened and how he got caught is so satisfying. It is insane. And I mean, truly the depths that this man would go to convince these women that, like, he was sending the same photos to women. He was sending the same video he would send, and he would record like 7 different ones with a different girl's name.
Oh, no.
So they were all getting literally the same videos, but their name was in it. So they didn't think anything about it. But he was just recording them one after another, sending them to all these different women. He said that he was the heir to some diamond fortune that's actually a real family that said that they've tried to sue him for misrepresentation.
No.
I mean, it is insane. He like fakes that he was attacked, all this other stuff. One of the women that he dated did get attacked, and he was not there. And I mean, they showed photos. When I say she was attacked, she was attacked. Like, it is bad. It is bad. And so there's the documentary. It follows 3 women who have all been involved in this whole scheme, but there's way more women than that, like way more. And it is insane. And he just like, he was taking money from these women, saying that like he had enemies after him and that he needed this amount of money in order to do this. And that, you know, I mean, one girl, he had her take out a $250,000 loan. Another one, he had her take out a credit card in her name, and he constantly kept asking her to get the limit raised. And she was like, I don't make enough money for that. She thought that she was getting something real, but he actually forged a paycheck to her for a different amount. He was forging paperwork showing that he made payments to these women and saying that like, oh, the transfer's coming through, it's coming through, and it never did. It is insane. He's been doing it for years. But
that's despicable.
He tried to rejoin Tinder.
Oh, no.
Tinder banned him. Period. They were like, we have technology. that will detect him if he
Mhm.
tries to rejoin, because he's very distinct looking. He's very handsome.
Yeah.
But I'm just saying.
That's horrible.
It's bad. Like, it is really bad. And I mean, he's taking private jets places.
Mm.
Like, it truly has no bounds. It's crazy. But I'm just saying, compared to that, if a girl wants a different guy to take her to dinner out a couple nights a week, I mean, look, who am I to judge? No one's getting hurt. It's just a meal.
I didn't
I'm just
say
saying.
was
I know.
judging.
I'm just saying.
I don't know why you're attacking me.
I'm not attacking you. I'm attacking the patriarchy in general.
Okay, I'm just saying, like, you got really hot about that.
Well,
and I
it's
said nothing.
frustrating because
Did you
like,
say frustrating or
it's
frustrating?
both.
Okay.
And it's just ridiculous.
Okay.
Taylor Swift, she has a song about it. If I was a man, then I'd be the man. Because she just talks about how, like, if a woman is super business savvy and she's kind of cutthroat, like, she's made out to be a bee. But if a man does it, he's just a smart businessman.
Yeah.
And so it's a really good song. I love Taylor Swift. But in the song, she says, if I were a man, then I'd be the man.
Yeah.
And I'm like, you're not wrong. Not wrong. Just saying. Mary, she was entertaining a few men at a time. And look, there's no saying they didn't know. They might have known. Maybe they were all fighting for her affection and her attention. Who knows?
Well, I mean, if she lived in a boarding house, I mean, everybody knew of everybody's comings and goings. I mean, they knew.
As we know by our very first case.
I mean,
just saying. And so, and this actually plays into it too, because some of them even lived in the boarding house.
I mean, that's what I'm saying.
So,
like they knew who was calling on
just
who.
saying. Just saying. It was one of these boarders that Mary set her sights on. His name was Daniel Payne. Daniel was a clerk and a cork cutter. And by the early summer of 1841, they were engaged. After church on Sunday, July 25th, 1841, Mary told her fiancé and her mother that she was going to New Jersey to visit a relative. Some refer to this relative as an aunt whose name is Miss Downings. Others just say relatives. So, again, unsure of what it is.
It is agreed upon that it is a relative.
It is agreed upon that it is a relative. And it is agreed upon that Mary said she would be back the next day.
Yes.
A severe storm came in, which I'm sure James Spann could have foretold, but
yes.
This is a little bit before his time.
The National Weather Service founder was born this year.
He was born. Actually, by this point, he would have been about 3, but we can't really expect him to be a prodigy.
What? Yeah.
We don't know. So, a storm hit that night, and when she did not return on Monday morning, her mother assumed that the weather delayed her a little bit, and she just decided to stay longer because,
makes sense.
Why not?
You just had to go on assumption that at this time there were no cell phones.
By Monday night, Mary still had not come back. Well, her mother, Phoebe, was able to get a message, and this is another thing that was in some, not in others. Her mother, Phoebe, was able to get a message to Miss Downings, and to everyone's shock, Miss Downings had not seen her the night before, and she was not expecting her either.
Oh.
At the time, some said she had simply run away, possibly in another attempt to get attention, seeing as she received so much the first time. Mary's fiancé, Daniel, grew increasingly concerned with Mary's disappearance, and that concern turned into fear when he remembered all of the stories about gangs of robbers and rapists that he had seen in the penny papers lately. 2 days after Mary had left the house, Daniel decided to go ahead and officially report her missing with the authorities. Her mother placed an advertisement in the following day's Sun asking for anyone who might have seen Mary to have the girl contact her as, quote, "It is supposed some accident has befallen her," but it was specifically noted that foul play was not suspected. One person who saw the advertisement was Arthur Cromelian.
Wow.
He was Mary's ex-boyfriend, and some say her ex-fiance.
Oh, the plot thickens.
And he was also a previous boarder at her mother's house.
Ooh.
Arthur decided to take a ferry over to New Jersey and see if he could find Mary himself. It was on July 28th of 1841 when two men were walking near Sybil's Cave on the shores of the Hudson River in Hoboken, New Jersey. They noticed a large object bobbing up and down in the water with the waves. There was a rowboat nearby, and they used it to see what the object might be. When they dragged the object into the boat to have a better look, they realized it was the body of a young woman. They rowed the body back to shore and ran to get help. Right as the woman's body was placed on the shore, Arthur had arrived and noticed all of the commotion. He was able to positively identify the woman as Mary Cecilia Rogers, and the area where her body was found was dubbed Murder Thicket.
Oh.
That will come back into play.
Murder Thicket.
According to the coroner, Mary's dress and hat were torn, and she was injured and bruised, possibly from being beaten.
Oh.
Whether this beating was from her murder or possibly from floating in the water, because, kind of like it just...
Right, just bumping.
The bumping and the waves
yes.
and everything like that. So it wasn't really sure as to what that came from. There were finger marks found on her throat, suggesting that she had been strangled. The coroner took special care to note she was not pregnant. And, quote, had evidently been a person of chastity and correct habits.
Oh.
Which how I love that. Such a wonderful... Anyways. There are no correct habits for women. It's fine. You can do what you want. Anyways. Arthur was, of course, questioned by the police. It was odd that he arrived right as her body was discovered, and even more odd that he had a previous relationship with her.
Yeah, I was kind of thinking that.
Could it have been jealousy? The police were actually able to rule Arthur out, and they moved on to their next suspect. And if you guessed the next one would be her fiancé, Daniel Payne, then you would be right.
You win a cookie.
After all, Daniel was the last person to see Mary alive the night that she left. Then rumors started to circulate that the seemingly happy couple was not happy at all.
Uh-oh.
Allegedly. The couple had been fighting, and Mary had threatened to call off the engagement just before her murder. Local papers wrote all about the beautiful Cigar girl and her mysterious death. The events of her death were sensationalized and received national attention.
I can't imagine news being sensationalized.
Right?
I can't imagine. To sell papers? What?
Insane.
That doesn't happen anymore.
The details of the case suggested that she was either murdered or maybe dumped by a local abortionist named Madame Restell after a failed procedure. Even though Daniel had an airtight alibi for the time of Mary's death, he continued to be a suspect. The New Yorker, which I put in parentheses just to be clear, this is a publication unrelated to the current New Yorker magazine. Different. This is New Yorker, where
Gotcha.
the other's the New Yorker.
Gotcha.
So just be clear.
Good to make a distinction.
I mean, you got to make sure. It didn't prevent them from suggesting in August of 1841 that he had a hand in Mary's death.
Well, but didn't the coroner say that she was chased, so to say? So
we'll get more into it.
Okay.
There is, and this is from the New Yorker, this is what they said, quote, "There is one point in Mr. Payne's testimony which is worthy of remark. It seems that he had been searching for Miss Rogers, his betrothed, 2 or 3 days. Yet when he was informed on Wednesday evening that her body had been found at Hoboken, he did not go to see it or inquire into the matter. In fact, it appears that he never went at all, though he had been there inquiring for her before. This is odd and should be explained." I mean, you're not the police, but okay.
But I mean, I have to say,
It is curious.
I'd want to see for myself and say, hey, I want to.
That's true.
I want
But
to
we also
see.
don't know how quickly her body was brought back over. We don't
This
know
is
where the
true. We
coroner's
don't-
was.
This is true. This is
There's
all
a
true.
lot of different things. So, several weeks later, 2 boys who were out in the woods collecting sassafras for their mother found some articles of women's clothing, including a handkerchief with the initials MR. This was right near Sybil's cave where Mary's body had been discovered. The Herald reported that, quote, the clothes had all evidently been there at least 3 or 4 weeks. They were all mildewed down hard. The grass had grown around and over some of them. The scarf and the petticoat were crumpled up as if in a struggle. Miss Frederica Loss was the mother of the 2 boys, and she ran a tavern called Nick Moore's House, which was not far from where the body was found. She claimed to have seen Mary in the company of a tall, dark stranger on the evening of July 25th. The 2 ordered lemonade and then left the tavern. Later that night, she heard a scream coming from the woods. At the time, she thought it was one of her sons, but after finding her boys safely inside, she decided it must have been an animal. But now that these items were found so close to her tavern, she felt certain that it had to have come from Mary. Papers across New York and New England started publishing salacious details and even some not so accurate details about the murder.
I mean, really? I'm shocked.
Right? In Ellicottville, New York, one reporter lamented the, quote, slovenly manner in which the coroner at Hoboken performed his duties.
Uh-oh.
But outside of Philadelphia, other papers wondered if the death had actually been a death by suicide. Even the governor of New York at the time, William H. Seward, got involved and published an announcement in several New York papers of a $750 reward for any information that helped solve the crime. Then on October 7th of the same year, Daniel Payne traveled to the murder thicket. This was after a drinking binge that he had taken across Hoboken. He had started drinking heavily after Mary's death and started telling people that he was seeing her ghost. At some point in the night, he drank a bottle of laudanum while sitting on a bench outside of Sybil's cave.
That's not good for anybody.
His body was found the next morning, only a few hundred yards from where Mary had been discovered.
Yikes.
A note found in Payne's pocket read, quote, to the world, here I am on the spot. God forgive me for my misfortune in my misspent time.
Yikes. So he he completed suicide.
Correct.
So, but his note didn't really give much explanation, just in his misspent time. So does that mean
I think
the time since Mary
he's just saying in his misspent time on earth, like to,
that's what I'm saying. Like,
forgive me for my misfortune that I had in the misspent time that I also had. Like, forgive me for all of this. But it said that he was pretty heavily accused of her murder.
And I mean that can take a toll on you, just emotionally. Like I didn't do this, but people. I mean, and especially if it makes the state, it makes national news, and the governor is getting involved in it, which, hey, that's big. I mean, I'm sure that would be really hard to, I mean, everybody knows who you are, especially in that town. So, I mean, you'd have to move to get away from that. I mean, and then that's something that you could actually do. You couldn't do that now because people would find out your name and, but I mean.
But keep in mind, so her body was found at the end of July.
Yeah.
His death by suicide was the beginning of October. So that's not long.
Yeah.
I mean, that's 2 months essentially when you kind of 2 months and a few days that all of this was happening. And so I'm sure it was, a whirlwind of
people are horrible. Though.
Well, people are garbage. We've discussed this.
I mean,
there's no telling what would have happened. Well, and then he also said he started seeing her ghost, and he was telling a lot of people this.
Yeah, and that would creep you out.
So I'm sure,
it would creep me out.
Regardless of whether people's beliefs on that situation, still, whether you do believe that he truly was seeing her ghost, or you believe that he was drinking to a point where he was hallucinating, either way, his mind, it was real.
Exactly.
And he's seeing his
He can't get away from it. He can't get away from it.
Regardless of where he is. Mm-hmm. And so I'm sure he thought, if I drink more, it'll stop, or I'll forget about it, but it wasn't working.
Right.
So, and you also have so many people that are looking at you that are saying, because what is the thing in true crime? The husband did it. Yeah. That is the thing.
And you also think about, at that time, even now, you see in New York, even though it's such a big city, mm-hmm. the blocks are, people know,
mm-hmm. because you're in certain boroughs, you have little boroughs of little pockets of people that all know each other.
Exactly. Mm-hmm. And so, he would be getting those looks.
Well, and also New York is not anywhere near what it is, what it is now. Sure. It's much smaller.
Exactly.
And everyone knew who Mary was because she was so famous.
Known.
Yeah.
Even all of these people wrote about her. All these famous people knew her. And so, he was getting, because he was the lucky guy that was going to marry the beautiful cigar girl. Mm-hmm. And so, he was getting all these looks of disgust, or mm-hmm. either of pity or of disgust, depending on how they judged him. And they judged
mm-hmm.
him.
And it's very unfortunate because, he thought that was
the only way out
for him. And, we never speculate on someone's mental health or the reasoning behind their decisions in those ways. And it is very sad and it is very unfortunate. And, but yeah, he also, and that's also why it was continued to be called Murder Thicket.
Oh,
because he was there as well.
And drinking an entire bottle
of laudanum.
That's
a lot.
And apparently, I don't know because I've not really, had laudanum. But apparently, I've read a lot of books and, such. Apparently, it's not the best taste in the world.
No. Well, imagine, though, if you're already kind of drunk.
If you're already in your cups. But, I'm just saying, just bless his bones,
It's difficult. A year later, Frederica Loss was shot, apparently accidentally, by her son.
Shot and killed?
On her deathbed, she confessed that Mary Rogers had come to her tavern that Sunday night with a tall and dark doctor who performed an abortion on her. Mary had died of complications, and Miss Loss's son had taken her body to the river.
Oh, no.
Although it's contradicted some of the facts of the case. The strangulation marks on Mary's neck, and the coroner's assertion that she was a person of chastity and correct habits. Regardless, Miss Loss's story became the popularly accepted truth. However, another version of this story is that the murder was done by the infamous Madame Restell, which we talked about just before. She was an early abortionist who practiced while it was still a felony to practice. Madame Restell died by suicide in 1878. Bit of a trigger warning, people. I'm sorry. By cutting her own throat in her bathtub.
Oh, my.
She is actually buried in Sleepy Hollow Cemetery. There is another suspect that we have not discussed yet, and that is John Anderson. It's speculated that he had made amorous advances to Mary that were rejected while she worked for him. Although he's buried in Greenwood Cemetery in Brooklyn, he actually died in 1881 in Paris. He claimed in his last days that he was being tormented by Mary's ghost.
Oh, my.
Newspapers offered several speculations as to the identity of Mary's murderer, but the police did not accept the tavern owner's story and no arrests were ever made. Eventually, the papers lost interest and stopped reporting about Mary.
Well, I mean...
But there is one man that did not lose interest. And that is Edgar Allan Poe. He was a former New Yorker, and he remembered Mary from her first, quote, disappearance in 1838. As the news of her murder reached him, he became fixated and followed every detail. In November of 1842, which is just a year after Mary's death, Poe published the first part of The Mystery of Marie Rogers. This is his second detective novel and the sequel to Murders at the Rue Morgue. The opening of Poe's story made his intent clear. Quote, "The extraordinary details which I am now called upon to make public will be found to form, as regards sequence of time, the primary branch of a series of scarcely intelligible coincidences, whose secondary or concluding branch will be recognized by all readers in the late murder of Mary Cecilia Rogers at New York." In his story, he not so subtly challenged he changed everything to Paris, and he changed the murder victim's name to Marie Rogers. He was so confident in his detective skills that he even claimed to have solved the real-life case in the story's introduction, when he said, quote, "All argument founded upon the fiction is applicable to the truth, and the investigation of the truth was the object." His story was popular with the public, but the police wrote off Poe's theories. Despite promising to solve the crime, Poe speculated regarding many suspects, but he never settled on one. Poe continued updating the story with the new evidence for years. Regardless, The Mystery of Marie Rogers is considered to be the first work of fiction that used a real murder as its source material.
That's interesting.
And that is the unsolved murder of the beautiful cigar girl, Mary Cecilia Rogers.
Well, I want to know.
Nobody knows.
I know. And that is interesting that it led to Edgar Allan Poe.
He was obsessed with this story.
He was an odd bird.
I love him.
Of course you do.
I love him.
Of course you do.
I know. But he truly was. And you can read. That's why this case is so, it's so widespread. There's so many
because
places.
you want to know where the inspiration for that book came from.
So much. This truly, I could turn this into an entire podcast on its own. There's that much material on it. But he just became truly obsessed by her murder. And he was also someone that was speculated to also be a frequenter of the tobacco emporium.
Yeah.
And so even though it's never truly said that he knew her story back from when she, the original story of her disappearing.
Right.
And so he totally remembered who she was, and being in the same literary circles as all these other people, he certainly heard about her.
Absolutely. Firsthand.
So he truly became obsessed. He did not believe in the abortion story. He did not think that it was true. However, if you do look up Mary Cecilia Rogers and her death, truly the assumed story that's kind of in the sources that are very straightforward with what's going on, they do just say that she was dumped in the Hudson River after a botched abortion attempt. Like, that is the story. That is where the story ends. That's where that's just been the assumed story. And anybody who hasn't looked into it, they'd assume that's what happened.
Yeah.
Like, but
it's plausible.
It's plausible, but there's so many reasons why it's not plausible.
Yeah.
Because of what the coroner said.
Yeah.
And it's like, I'm sorry, but while medicine wasn't great back then, I'm pretty sure you'd know that had, I mean, I don't know, but, and it's also said too that, like, I know it's, sorry, Brad, that I know this, but a body discarded in water is actually more prone to, like, stay intact as far as, like, bodily evidence because of freezing temperatures and different things like that. If a body is left out for scavengers to get, you are less likely to know the cause or have different things go on.
And, you know, if he did do a correct autopsy and all that fun stuff, you know, he would see if there was water in her lungs, and if it had been, you know, like a drowning, if it had been a completion of suicide, then there would have been water in her lungs.
And why would there be strangle marks around her neck?
And why would there be strangulation marks? I mean, you know, let's look at all these things.
I mean, there's a lot of things that it doesn't add up. It doesn't make sense. And then it brings me back to the previous story 3 years earlier where it was said that she was seen with a tall naval officer. And Frederica Loss kept saying that she saw her in her tavern with a tall, dark, handsome man. So that makes me wonder, was something going on? Was that like a rekindled relationship thing? Did he get jealous and murder her and get rid of her body because she was engaged now?
Yeah.
Because if you believe the story of him, she quit very quickly after rumors started about him. She quit her job.
Yeah.
So it's like, is that the way to go with it?
Did she go and finally say, hey, I'm marrying this guy, you know, no
like,
more?
It's too late for you. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
You know, what was really going on?
Like, was this, hey, this is the last chance, you know, I love you, but, you know, either marry me or I'm marrying this guy? Could that have been what it was?
Well, and for Frederica Loss to say that it wasn't long after they left that she heard someone screaming, that it's like, okay, well, what happened there? How did, you know, and I really don't know. Her sons, there's one article that I read that said her sons were arrested in conjunction to the murder at some point, but then they were let go because there was no evidence to.
And how old were her sons?
It didn't say, but I mean, one of them shot her.
Yeah.
So I don't know. And then I wouldn't imagine that they would be young if they were said to have helped someone dispose of a body.
Well, but you got to think about at that time, kids were expected to grow up faster than they are now.
So I'm not really, I mean,
12 years old now and 12 years old then, very different.
So I mean, I'm not really sure how old her sons were, but there's so much, because you thought you had it figured out.
Well, I wondered, with her being away for a few days, I really thought that maybe she had gone to get rid of an unwanted child. I really thought maybe that was why she was gone. Maybe that is
why she was gone for a few days.
I mean,
and why she didn't say anything.
Exactly.
Maybe that is why she left a suicide note, because she didn't know if she'd live or not.
Exactly.
But when you think there's a 3-year gap and she came back.
Yeah.
And what also makes me wonder is maybe that was part of it.
And because she went to do it again.
And it was with the same person who did it before. And then what, think
There are lots of theories.
There's a lot. I mean, like I said, there could be an entire set aside podcast for this because they're truly.
And you know what? Maybe the coroner was the one that did it, and the coroner, he wanted to cover his tracks.
Maybe he was getting paid some money on the side from Madame Restell, because it was a felony. Maybe he was getting some extra pocket change to say that some of those things were a murder. It's like. There's so many things at that time.
And then to make a point to say, oh, no, well, there's no way it could have been that because she was chased. Yep. I mean, absolutely, there could have been a payoff there.
And it's interesting to me because then, too, also think about when anybody asked her where she had been, she said she went to the countryside.
Yeah, and she got angry.
But also and she was sad, and there were all these different things about her and these different things, and like, there's no telling what could have happened, but also that makes me think too, and there may even be some people who are older today that remember when this would happen, when a girl would become pregnant, she would go stay with an aunt.
Uh-huh.
And she would go live with an aunt for a while, and then all of a sudden she'd come back, and then she had a baby brother because her parents adopted the child. That was always something that happened. That's part of what happened with Ted Bundy, honestly, is his sister was his mother.
Yeah.
And
that happened.
And so it's like, were they saying, was that still like the phrasing back then is, oh, she went to the countryside for, to go visit family.
Or they didn't come back with a new sibling. They just came back after they recuperated, and the child had been, so then it's like a new family or whatever.
You said that time that you went to the countryside to go visit family.
Mm-hmm.
You left this time to go visit family.
Mm.
So it's like, what is going on? And then you just end up dead.
Yeah. And I couldn't pull something like that off because I chatter so much and I tell you about all the things. I could never pull off something like that. You could.
Probably.
Straight up serial killer.
I mean, not yet.
No. And you wouldn't kill me because you love me too much.
In the words of Lil Wayne, I ain't a killer, but don't push me. So.
But I couldn't.
True.
My face would give me away.
That is true.
My face talks out of turn too much.
Mine does to an extent.
If a person knows you.
Yeah, but if not, then no, it doesn't.
Yeah. If a person knows you, they know your little tails, but you don't have big tails. I'm so flippin' expressive.
That's true.
Look,
yeah, I'm not at all.
My face spoke out of turn at Disney World, and it was hilarious.
I definitely don't have very many tells.
I do, and I can't help it.
I have looks though.
Yes,
you know my look. Like
I'll just say spit it out.
I can talk without saying anything.
We can have an entire conversation
we can.
Just looking at each other.
It's very interesting, but yeah, I mean, there's so many different ways that the story could go. There's so many
lots of different ways.
I mean, and then what if it was John Anderson? How does that come into play? Did she just happen to run into him and he was like, oh, let's go to the tavern and get some lemonade, and then he kills her? Or because he made an advance on her again and she said no?
I don't think it was him.
And I mean, I don't think that it was, but if he's on his deathbed saying that he's seeing her ghost, why are you seeing her ghost? That was 1881. This was 40 years after her death.
That is him just reveling in. Well, but you know what? I have heard a lot that when you reach the end of your life, you just kind of think about the best time.
That's true.
Like when my grandmother had dementia, and before she became nonverbal, my little brother would walk through the house and she would call him by my dad's name, and she would call my dad by my grandfather's name. And it just, she reverted back to a good time in her life. Now, we don't know how he died or whatever, but a lot of time you do kind of think back on a happy time in your life. And so maybe he was really just thinking about that time and how he really did wish that it had turned out differently with her, because she was such a beautiful, charming, kind, wonderful
It's very interesting because a lot of people, especially people who work in assisted living facilities or they work in nursing homes, a lot of people will say, which again, depending on your personal beliefs and what you think about different things, a lot of people say the reason that children and elderly people can see the other side is because they're closer to the other side. So like children are closer to it because they're children, and then when you get older you're closer to it yet again. And so a lot of people say, like, that work in assisted living homes and nursing homes, they'll say that their patients will say that they see their lost loved ones and that they're like right there in front of them talking to them. And so it's like, was that something? Was he just coming to the close of his life and he just thought, like, I mean, maybe she was there, maybe she wasn't, but he was just at that point in his life where, he thought he saw her there, or I don't know, but he kept saying for years that he saw her ghost. So I don't know, but I do know that there's a few people on TikTok that talk about like the funny things that have happened while they live in like they worked at a nursing home or something.
Oh, I bet there are stories.
Oh, and then I read this article where it was like deathbed confessions that were given to hospital workers or things like that. And I mean, some of them are crazy. Like,
now, the ones that I love are I've read different things that patients have done coming out of or going under with anesthesia, and y'all, that's funny stuff right there.
There was one that was like a deathbed confession, and they said that it was right before this woman had died, and she wasn't in a nursing home, but she was lucid. The person said that she just looked at them and she was like, I should probably tell someone before I go. They don't need to look under the front stairs of the house. What?
Well, now we got to go look under the front stairs of the house.
What? It's like,
I mean, that makes you go look. I don't know that I would ever have looked under the front stairs of the house, but now I'm going to have to.
Yeah. And there were other like women who confessed to like poisoning their husbands and different things. Cause like for the longest time, people couldn't trace arsenic. So you could just easily, I mean, it's like Goodbye Earl.
That's exactly what I thought of.
You just gotta. So I don't know. It's funny, and I don't know. I'm not sure as far as the end of his life was, coming to fruition. If that's what it was, I don't think it was him. I just find it interesting that even after 40 years, he still said, like, I continue to see her ghost, and he was in Paris at this point. So,
and I think weird. It was Paris that there was a woman that was her specialty. Like, she worked at an apothecary, and that the women would come to see her if they were in an arranged marriage or in a disagreeable marriage. They would come to see her, and she would help them get rid of their problem, which would be a husband. And I am not promoting and saying it's a good thing, please. But like, she was, I can't remember her name, but she was known for this.
It Kayla?
No, it was not.
Was she me and I am her, and she is my past life? I'm just saying. You never know. Look, you said I got a good poker face. They'd be like,
you really do.
Excuse me, madame. And I'm like,
but I mean, I can't remember what the name was or whatever, but it was like for the upper class, those were all arranged marriages and such. And, some of those men, not cool. I mean, some of those women, not cool too. But yeah, she was known for assisting in such things.
I have a problem. Oh, really?
It's about 180 pounds. Sweaty. Mean.
And then me going, do you have your papers in order? Make sure you get the money in the house. No. Check before you murder him. Make sure everything is in
Murder is bad. Killing is bad. Be kind. Do not kill people.
Well, that wraps up another case for us for the week. We have a website where you can find any and all ONUC information you are looking for. It is onenationundercrime.com. We are One Nation Under Crime anywhere that you would like to look for us. Please keep in mind we do have a YouTube channel as well that we upload all the episodes to. So if you prefer YouTube over something else, you can subscribe to our YouTube channel. Some people like to use YouTube because they can play it through their television, and so they can listen to it in the house and stuff. For those like who don't have an Apple TV or things like that, a lot of people do, and we do have some subscribers on YouTube, which is surprising. So I wasn't expecting, and we have some videos that have become very popular.
We ain't hating. I mean,
no, I mean
one
of our most popular, the Harp Brothers is popular.
I haven't listened to all of that one.
Yeah, the Harp Brothers is popular. Lavinia Fisher is very popular.
Yeah.
There's several on there that it's kind of surprising. Yeah. I'm like, who found it that week? Because it's interesting, like how those are found. But
how is Madame Lalaurie?
I know, she's on there, but she hasn't been on there long. So not too many yet, but yeah, so you can go on there as well. And some people just don't like to use podcast apps. So you can always use YouTube to go find those. If you love our podcast as much as we do, go rate and review our podcast. On Apple, we shouldn't have to say this, but 5 stars only. If you have nothing to say, keep it nice to yourself. Yep.
Something like that.
Something like it.
Be kind.
If you have nothing nice to say,
keep it to yourself. Thumper's advice.
And we have a Patreon where you can become a Patreon member and you can help with the cost of hosting and making the show.
We'd love it.
We would love it. We do have some pretty cool people in there. So,
one of them's really handsome.
And if you are a Patreon too, kind of the way that the Patreon works is like, it's almost kind of like a little Facebook group where like Patreons can talk back and forth to each other, like under posts and stuff that you can kind of like talk back and forth with people in there. So go see if you can find some ONUC fans that you would like to be best friends with other than us. And we appreciate you guys
very much
listening to this week's episode of One Nation Under Crime. We will see you here, same time,
different crime,
next week. And remember, there isn't always liberty and justice for all, especially if you have an unsolved murder.
Yeah. We'll try to figure it out, though.
Maybe.
I'm perplexed. I want to know.
You always are.
Unkind.
Goodbye.
Bye.